Hello everyone. My name is Etmof Young. Welcome to the very first event of ASLI this year. Happy New Year. I hope our year started out well, despite the geopolitics going on here and there. Next week we have Davos, so we are really looking forward to Davos to hear from the leaders, political and economic leaders, where potential outlook for the year. But for today, which as is our custom in ASLI, we usually do a review of the previous year and then try to explore what the current year sort of has in stock. So today we want to do a review of African and global space activities in 2025 and explore how 2026 could be. So it's going to be an interactive session, though we have a couple of experts who are going to be the lead discussants. So I'll do a brief introduction of the discussants or panelists. So I'll just start with Nana Appiah Acquaye. He is the managing editor of Tech Review Africa, a leading Pan-African technology and space online media platform based in Accra, Ghana. His work focuses on Africa's digital economy, innovation, space and satellite development, and technology policy. Next from here is Lillian Assefa. She's the editor-in-chief of a space science magazine called African Science Stars. She's a computer engineer working in software development. And then next is Mariam Saliu, who is the head of operations and business development at Space in Africa. She leads market development, partnerships, and revenue growth initiatives across both government and commercial sectors. Prior to this, she spent several years at Nicomsat Limited. That's a Nigerian communications company owned by the federal government. There, she was driving revenue growth through satellite-based solutions, client acquisition, and strategic partnerships. Then next from here is Nelly-helen Ebruka. She's a PhD researcher in politics at the University of Manchester, UK. Her research examines historical and institutional considerations of Africa-Europe Space Cooperation. She's also the outreach manager at Spacehubs Africa. She hosts a monthly virtual program that provides a platform for students, young professionals, and experts to discuss key issues shaping Africa's space sector. Um, I'm not sure Johnmark is here. We had a chat earlier this morning. I think due to health issues, he's not. Oh, okay, he's able to join. Okay. Hello, Johnmark.
Hello, team.
Okay, I was
Hi,
just,
everyone.
yeah, thanks. You're able to make it. Sorry.
Yeah,
How are you feeling?
sorry, I didn't catch that, team.
Yes, I said, how are you feeling now?
Not great. It's just the onset of the cold, so everything is just terrible at the moment, but I'll get better.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks for joining. I just joined at the right time. So John Mark is the communication officer at Digital Earth Africa. He's a passionate space communicator and communications expert dedicated to raising awareness of space and its potential. The other person, Timothy Kuhamba, also reached out to me. I think he is not feeling fine, and I'm not sure he's here. So he may join later, or he may not be able to join. Well, whichever the case, thanks colleagues for joining. Thanks everyone, and I'm looking forward to um, a fruitful and engaging discussion. The format I propose that we follow is we'll start with the panelists. I'll engage with the panelists for them to share some opening reflections. Then I'll follow up with some questions. And then, of course, we now open it for everyone, the entire participants, audience to also make contributions, and then we engage one another. Um, in between, we're all welcome to share comments or make share questions using the chat box. And of course, as much as possible, it would be nice to keep ourselves muted, except when we want to speak. All right. So maybe I think I would like to start on a sort of more personal level. Um, and I'll just address this to each of the panelists. What were on a personal level now, what were your highs and lows in the past year? I mean, professionally now, what are your highs and your lows? Professionally within the space domain, so to say. Of course, I know we are all engaged in one thing or the other, but the focus is around space. Nana, can I start with you?
Okay, Ethan, thanks so much, and thanks to your team for putting this, whole things, the whole webinar together. And it's very good to also, connect with my colleagues online here. I think my highs for last year was the attendance of the official inauguration of the African Space Agency, in Cairo and in Cairo, Egypt, and that also, happened concurrently with the New Space, Africa conference, which drew a lot of, attention from a global player. And to me, being at the launch was very significant for me, because then I realized that Africa has now gotten its act together, and is ready to be a player on a global space arena than to be a spectator. And for me to be covering that event, wow, it was one of the the best things that could have ever happened to me. My lows is the challenges that we had. I think the Ghana government had, especially the sector minister, the sector in charge of telecommunication and digital innovation, had with, one satellite operator, Starlink. That was, I happened to, offer coverage to that story or to that news. And it wasn't a pleasant one. Whilst the operator is trying to provide, coverage to those that, are not connected. You have, government agency also trying to prevent, that from happening. And to me, it was one of the unfortunate things to have happened within our countries and the space. So that's what I can say. It's a sad moment. It was a sad moment for me.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, well, somebody talked about the Starlink economy now. Starlink seems to have a very strong face to SpaceX now, Starlink. So we see what is going to happen this year. They're already in the news again. So we'll see how that turns out. Thanks. Lillian, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you. Okay. I would like to start by saying it's so nice to be part of this conversation. And for 2025, it had both its highs and lows for me personally. So when we start from the highs, I think most of the people who have attended the inauguration of APSA, I think that's the high for most of us. So I as well, one of the few personal high points in 2025 was attending that event and being part of that. Apart from that, being the editor of African Science Stars, we were able to release 2 editions in the last year. So both of them were successful editions. One of them was more towards female contributions in astronomy, which is a topic in which most media still don't cover. So that was one of the highs for me. And apart from that, from Ethiopian's perspective as well, we had so much events, outreach events. We had the World Space Week celebration, festivals, and we did tour different astronomy clubs here in Ethiopia as well. And yeah, these are some of the highs. And yes, the lows could be when we compare it to the previous year, 2024. The events which happened in Ethiopia were slightly low. So I would say that's where some of the low points of that. And yeah, that's it from my end.
Thanks a lot. Mariam, do you want to go next?
Of course, yeah, I will go next. So yes, for 2025, I would say that my highs would also be the AFSA's inauguration. I mean, the inauguration was actually at our event, Space in Africa. So it was my high for 2025. And the lows is basically, I think Appiah had already mentioned that earlier, the way that the LEO connectivity kind of shifted the market, even geo sector members or satellite providers were forced to literally do a price shift. While it is a welcome development in terms of if you're looking at the market as a whole, I would still say that it was a whole. I mean, it affected regional service providers like NatComSat, etc. So yes, that was a low for me in 2025.
Thank you. Nelly?
Thank you. Thank you so much, A-Team. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And just to begin by saying I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at this virtual program. And it's always great to support the work of the African Space Leadership Institute. So one of the highs for me, quite similar to Nana and Lillian, was the inauguration of the African Space Agency, but particularly the Africa EU Space Partnership Program that was launched at events. So my research, like you've said, is a lot around the history and institutions of Africa-Europe cooperation. So it was really good and was really great to see, having this partnership very structured and very institutionalized through the AESPP. So that was one of the highs to see that happened as well. And one of the lows for me is a bit personal, and then it also relates to a common experience that was shared by young people. So last year, ISE was at Australia, and a lot of the young people from Africa that wanted to attend the ISE did not attend the ISE. I know it looks like a simple issue because a lot of people had visa challenges, but it really goes down to show how non-space considerations in geopolitics, like you say, really influence the industry. Now, the theme for that ISC was Space for All, right? It was Space for All, and it was about connecting everybody and making sure everybody has a platform and a place to talk about space. But we see these power structures in global politics, like visa issues, just obstructing that from happening, like with no consideration, proper considerations in some instances. So it really goes to show that yes, we are seeing a lot of improvement, we're seeing a lot of numbers go up in terms of the work that is being done in Africa, but we still have these barriers. We still have these bigger issues to confront because it's the ISE, for example, it's not just a conference, it's not just a talk shop. There are lots of opportunities that could happen there. There are lots of research that could just, happen by meeting other people and talking to other people and just collaborating. And that really just goes back to show that we still have a long way to go in making space for all and making space as accessible as we really want it to be. So yeah, that's it from my end.
Yeah, thanks. And a very good point. Actually, knowing what could have happened with Australia, I just didn't bother my head because I knew Nigeria getting visa for Australia was going to be a problem. So I didn't even bother my head about that. But let's see how this year goes. Turkey looks more, I wanted to say friendly, but I don't know whether that's the right word to use. But let's see how this year goes. Johnmark?
Yeah, thanks, Eti. So I'll try to be brief. And from what the previous panelists have said, 2025 was a year where conversations around space in Africa matured. So we've seen, sorry about the background noise. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all the other previous panelists have mentioned the inauguration of the Africa Space Agency. Now, this goes ahead to show that the conversations are now maturing in Africa. And I'd say also from a personal perspective is I got to be part of the many conversations and discussions centered around space in Kenya and Africa as well. So whether it's conferences, whether it's panel discussions. So I feel like this contribution is really important and sort of launched us from where we were in 2024 to where we got to in 2025. Now, all this sounds very flowery in terms of the adoption of space in Africa. I'd say the laws would be fine. We are having these conversations, but then how do we get to adopt them or actualize them? So we have so many incredible tools. We have so much data, even some hosted in Africa, as is the case with Digital Health Africa, but you find that the uptake is really low. So how do we ensure that these discussions that we have in rooms translate to actual actions in person or physically, or just how we integrate them into our different industries? So I'd say those are my reflections for now. Happy
Thanks.
to contribute. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll dive a bit more into the things you've brought up. But I'll now kind of scale up a bit. So moving from personal now to looking at more at a maybe continental level. Interestingly, looking around the panel, so to say, we all have sort of different backgrounds, or maybe not background, but in terms of what we are engaged in. So I know Lillian ate a lot of astronomy and maybe some other things. Johnmark, communication, science communication, Earth observation, Appiah, satellite communication, connectivity, and related things. Nelly, policy, law, international relations, and Mariam, industry, especially with your work with Space in Africa. So maybe either from a sectorial point of view or from a regional point of view, looking across Africa now, how just your reflection of the past year. Maybe I start with Johnmark.
All right. Thanks, Etimi. So from a regional perspective, I'd say, especially now that I'm speaking from the background of Earth observation, in as much as I'm a space communicator, my professional background is now centered around Earth observation. So going by the kind of work that we did in 2025, we saw that Earth observation moved closer to operations. So what I mean by this is we saw different industries all across Africa adopt Earth observation data in their decision making. So this goes ahead to show that there was better regional collaborations and even shared platforms. So this was very encouraging, especially in the downstream application of space, where we have more adoption and more people actually using this. Was it to the level that we expect it to be, or that I hope personally it would get to? No, but it was very promising. So yeah.
If I can still speak, Johnmark, looking at still on Earth observation, so you talked about Digital Earth Africa, there was also the GMES and the other Earth observation programs going on. Where are we when it comes to, I mean, so many technologies or applications and services have been developed now. Is Africa sufficiently able to stand on its feet now when it comes to Earth observation, right from conceptualization, development of technology, services, applications, and even the use of the applications? What's your view?
Realistically speaking, I'd say that Africa is still not able to stand on its own. And I'd say this is one of the challenges that we might face for the better part of 2026. There's still an over-reliance on foreign entities for different things that we might benefit more from what they hosted here regionally. So I'd say, make it short, is that the technology advanced faster than the systems meant to use it. And what I mean by that is, we have so many technologies, we have so many programs, platforms, but there are still certain nitty-gritty details that maybe Nelly will speak about, especially when it comes to policy and laws. These are things that sort of limit that progress. So I'd say once we find a synergy between these industries, then it could be hopeful for the adoption of Earth observation and different technologies. As you mentioned, so many were launched, but then if we haven't found a loophole around these barriers, then it's still going to be a challenge. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, very well. Of course, there will be contributions from other colleagues also. Thanks. Lillian, do you want to go next?
Sure. So from my perspective, more on being the science communicator side of astronomy and space science, one of the few high points where I have seen more engagement in outreach events and educational programs across Africa. So I've seen it, there was a steady growth from across the continent from each site. So we have few partners from west, north, east, and south as well from each corners of Africa, and we've seen they have more engaged in, helping young people to see space science as an easier place to do their research, so they create the curiosity inside them. So that was the few highs. And I also mentioned that we were able to release 2 editions of our magazine. So for those of you who don't know, our magazine is called African Science Stars, and we try to collect different articles, different stories from across the globe, and we try to make the voice heard of the people. So we try to bridge the gap between the society and the astronomy and the space science side. So apart from that perspective, I think it was a very good year. And yeah, generally, 2025 was promising for Africa. We have seen the launch of AFSA. There were some economic growths. There were lots of partnership programs, for example, the EU Africa Partnership Program as well. So yeah, I would say 2025 was a great year.
Would you like to compare 2025 and 2024? So in 2024, we had the very first General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union for the very first time in Africa since the establishment of the IAU. In terms of impact, between when the event was held, I think that was August 2024, and then last year. And then this year started out very well, so to say. The SKA, it was in the news recently. They've started some activities from that angle. But and SKA, that's South Africa, and it's more of an international venture, so to say. So looking at astronomy across Africa, different countries, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, different countries, where are we?
I would say, while comparing 2024 with 2025, I think the IAU General Assembly laid a foundation for 2025. So in 2024, having that event in the African continent was a huge milestone for us. That's an obvious, and it's a very good start for us. So I believe after that event happened, I think there were more initiatives to bring forward the space sector of Africa. So I think not rather comparing them, but I believe that 2024 set a foundation for us to continue what we started it to 2025 further. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Nana, do you want to go next?
Okay, so if I may, in the area of, satellite communication, on the continent. I think last year saw, a massive adoption, of satellite connectivities, which has been operated by, investors, international investors like, SpaceX and then the Amazons. And we realized that the push by Starlink and Leo has gotten, has really proven, beneficial. The adoption rate currently as it stands looks very impressive. You look at, and you look at Nigeria going past the 66,000, going past, beyond, I think 60, they are now 66,000, mark, same as Uganda. Now Zimbabwe also going for, 40,000, about 40,000. Kenya is hovering around, 19, 20,000. Botswana is also in there as well. So the adoption of satellite connectivity, operated by Starlink is really gaining grounds. And what is more important, what is more impressive is how, the 10% and 15% of African population that is, that has been, pushed by, that is not connected. We're seeing that gradually some of these, these communities or populations, as time goes on, will definitely, be connected if, the operators, are able to, speed up in, getting mobile phone manufacturers to bring in, the direct to, mobile device, affordable mobile devices onto the market. So it's been positive. What we've witnessed within that space as well is how, Starlink is aggressively, pushing. And recently, was it December, Amazon Leo, Cooper, which has now rebranded to Leo, is also, coming up as more or less a second world power. And there's going to be a serious competition on the market. As to who gets the upper hand, we're yet to see. But it's also interesting to note that, connectivity, digital connectivity on the African continent is mainly, for now, is mainly driven by the telcos, network operators. And so you have the Vodafone, you have the Vodacom, you have the MTNs, Telecel, Orange in the line. Let me tell you, it's way back 2024, MTN, they didn't see, satellite communication as a main business, to drive on, to make, to get their system running well, or to still hold their dominance. And I remember having a chat with one of the group executives, and it was clear that they were not interested. It wasn't a very good business case for them. But I don't know whether we remember, around that year, we had an experience with a South African, around the South Africa coast, the sea cable incident. And that threw all of them, all the network operators on the continent into a haywire situation where they got confused because and that got them to lose a lot of businesses. And so right after that, I think within the second quarter of 2025, then you realize that all the network operators began partnering with some satellite operators. For example, you see MTN then started its testing, started its first, device a satellite link text. That was the first, I think the second quarter of 2025. You also saw Vodafone, forming, partnering with Cooper, Amazon Cooper by then. And then we also saw Orange, doing so. Starlink, it's Safaricom in Kenya had a little bit issue with Starlink coming into their corner, but for now, I think they've been able to trash their differences out. So we are going to see, we've seen a lot of partnerships within the telecom space, where now the space satellite technology or communication issue is now something that is worth pursuing, and that is what all the telecommunications are doing. They are now partnering with this network operators, and if they're able to do that effectively, there's going to be a lot of connection and lot of consumer comfortability in the system.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this question later, but maybe I should just bring it up now since we are talking about satellite communication. Still on, Nana, I wanted to see, looking at this year, 2026, already some things have already started happening. Some days ago, we got news that I think China applied for about 200,000 satellites. IRIS², it's the European sort of competitor for Starlink, the European equivalent or counterpart for Starlink. It's supposed to come up start of next year. And just like GMES and Africa, it's possible that IRIS² will be extended to Africa. So there's IRIS² from Europe, there is Starlink, and then there is Amazon Leo, formerly called Kuiper, which I think whether it's Nigeria that gave some landing rights recently. So, and then of course you have the telcos. So how do you see this ground playing out, looking at all these different satellite operators from outside on one hand, and then of course the telcos on the other hand too, within this year now that we're entering?
Ethan, I think you've seen, Starlink, the Cuba taking the lead in Africa, and they in looking at the performance, it's very clear that there's a business, there's a market out there for satellite communication, and so it will continue to grow. What has been the challenge for these operators is the fact that governments, regulations or policies on the continent has not been a unified one. So it got fragmented, policies dotted all around the place on these, and these players have to, try to, follow or abide by what it states in there. And that has been a challenge. And so, yes, there's going to be the adoption rate of satellite connectivity. Telecom is going to be high. There's still room for other players as well. And yes, we also look at the cost. Starlink, had a bit of a problem in some of its operating countries because of the cost. Nigeria was one. Kenya also came shouting on the rooftop about pricing and all those things. That has also been a challenge. And the argument as to, yes, it's there's going to be these areas, satellite connectivity is going to reach areas that have not been covered by, terrestrial infrastructure or network operators. But will it be affordable for these rural folks, these areas that have not been connected? Will it be, per the capita income level of Africans, would the services be affordable? Looking at how things stands now, no. Because a Starlink service, the cost of one Starlink, device, if you bring it to Ghana, it's very, very expensive, and the rural folk won't be able to purchase that, right? So, cost in these areas will be the game changer. And if the other players comes in there and they're able to really, reduce costs, be able to play along the cost area, they will be able to play effectively and win the game. Maybe be on top of Starlink or Cuba. Talking about the other players.
Fine. Thanks. Mariam, you have a lot of experience, both from NICOMSAT, doing satellite communication and connectivity in NICOMSAT, and then now in Space in Africa, tracking the industry. You want to give us some reflection of 2026?
So for 2026, I would say that for tracking the industry and looking at the industry generally, John had shared earlier about the downstream sector of the ecosystem. I will speak more on the upstream sector. We had a significant growth in that sector. About 6 companies in South Africa contributed to a global mission with over 116 products. I mean, that certifies Africa as a global player in the manufacturing sector of the global economy. No, then speaking on the connectivity, like Appiah had said, in the whole Africa ecosystem, the pricing or how the affordability that he spoke about, it will be very interesting to see because satellite connectivity itself, it's not enough, is not has traditionally not been an affordable service. So when it has always been, will I say, marketed as you being used to connect the underserved area. It has always been a thing of how would that work? Because even for Geo before Leo or Starlink or the likes came into the market, the equipment, the possibility of purchasing or even being able to afford satellite service has always been an issue. So for Geo, for Nashcomsa, for example, my experience there was that there were different financing models that were used to be able to push this service to underserved areas, working with state governments and all that. So, I mean, for me, it would be interesting to see how that would come in for how underserved areas would be able to afford the service. And if you look deep into the penetration and the usage of even Starlink right now, it is in major cities. So I'm not sure how we're going to be able to push the service, satellite service, for example, for underserved areas. For MNOs who use satellite, they typically use it for backhauling. So for the pricing, they can absorb it into their business, will I say, model and how their operation. So the use case for satellite services in underserved areas would be really interesting to see, and how, will I say, how African governments will be able to foster that kind of arrangement in their policy work and how that would come to be.
Thanks, Mariam. Nelly, your reflection on 2026? So you're muted.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, team. I think my reflection for 2026 would be from the experiences from 2025. So just going back to some of the
Oh, so I actually meant to say your reflection on 2025. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So at the regional level for 2025, I think firstly, from my perspective, there was a lot of political continuity and consolidation. If we look at the joint Africa EU partnership strategy of 2007, that was when space was highlighted as one of the partnership priority areas. And since 2007 till 2025, there have been so many Earth observation projects, navigation project, etc. But quite interesting, in 2010, there was a joint statement by the then African Union Commissioner, one of the commissioners, and particularly the EC Commissioner as well, Vice President Tajani. And I just want to quickly just one statement here. They were talking about the possibility of an African Space Agency, and this was 15 years ago. And they said such an agency could, at least in its initial phase, focus on practical areas capable of producing benefits for the African citizen, such as telecommunications, the use of Earth observation data to monitor weather, environment, and climate change. Now, this statement was made 15 years ago, and they were looking at what could a potential African Space Agency do in the context of Africa-Europe relations. And we see 15 years later, the current model of the African EU Space Partnership Program is exactly that. So history does matters in how we begin to conceptualize what partnership is. But in 15 years, of course, a lot has changed in Africa and a lot has changed in the global space arena. But we see a kind of directional locking in the partnership trajectory of Africa-EU relations. Why this is important is because the EU, or Europe generally, is one of Africa's closest trade partner, business partner, like our geographical factor of being neighbors. There's a lot of political collaboration between the two regions. So for me, last year was a very significant year in seeing what kind of direction does the Africa EU Space Partnership Program, what will it take, what will it look like? And if you look at what was under the ASPP, I don't know if we are familiar with it, but you would see that Earth observation was, of course, incorporated. Weather, climate monitoring also was also incorporated, but a new factor for space business was introduced. So that was a very critical factor that had not been very pronounced in the past. So we want to see how this would look like in 2026 in implementing, supporting the growing African private sector. What would this look like? What kind of shape would this take? I think that's one thing that really happened last year that's quite outstanding. However, again, at the regional level, I saw that there was a lot of networking spaces, a lot of places for people to dialogue. Countries hosted events like Johnmark had mentioned some of the events in Kenya. And again, there was Spacehubs Africa. We also really supported the Ghana Space Conference as well. There was the African Women in Space Conference as well. So there was a lot of momentum, of course, the New Space Africa conference, a lot of momentum on let's talk, let's have meetings, let's have all these dialogues. And what I really want to see then is some of the key outputs of some of these meetings. We need access to communicates, declarations, reports, because sometimes it just goes beyond LinkedIn posts to say, oh, hi, this is what happened in these panels. So what is the direction? What was the final decision, or what was the conclusion of the conference? I think that's something we really have to revisit in how we do networking and some of these discussions we do on the continent sometimes. So yes, we're having a lot of dialogue. Yes, we're having a lot of meetings, but what was the final? What did we get from these conferences? So it will be interesting to see if communiques will be released, or if, reports or some kind of follow-up to some of these, dialogues that we had. And then thirdly, at the regional level again, there was a lot of encouragement for young people and a lot of involvement from young people as well. Due to the work I do at Spacehubs Africa, I'm very interested in space ecosystem building. We get to interact a lot with young people in my morning dialogue sessions and my volunteering at SGC Africa a lot. So there were webinars almost weekly. I had never seen such, there was webinars, not just webinars, small outreach projects all over the continent. Young people were really trying to contribute. So it's not just the big conferences or the big policy decisions that were made or events, but also even at the grassroots level, we see that a lot of young people last year, they really wanted to talk. There was a lot of discussions around topics like maybe AI. I think there was a webinar on diplomacy, negotiation. How can Africa negotiate with other countries for space partnership that was organized by some SGC volunteers from Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, and the rest. So I think the young people are very interested not just in space, like in their own personal careers or their own professional growth, but they are beginning to be more self-aware at the regional level. What do we want to do together as Africans? I think that's something that we should not overlook as well. So I think that's some of my key reflections for 2025 at the regional level.
Thanks, Nelly. And maybe I want to follow up on the issue of the meetings, the events and conferences that came up in Africa, especially recalling your initial comment about the challenges of attending the IAC. So I have a two-part question, and of course everybody can contribute to that. Last year there were a couple of events like you mentioned. This year also we're also expecting a couple of events. In Kenya, we're expecting the Kenya Expo in June. That same June, Rwanda is hosting the IAF Space Conference on Climate Change. We had the Ghana conference last year. I don't know whether it's going to be an annual event. Of course, like you mentioned, it was supported by Spacehubs Africa. We had the New Space Africa conference last year, and it's going to happen again this year. And then Nigeria also is hosting I think they call it
Africa
Africa
Space
Space
Economy.
Economy, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Ethiopia had the Space Forum last year, which is also going to happen again this year. So, one, how the challenges we have with these meetings, like you mentioned, we don't just want to have LinkedIn posts. We want to move from just talk to sort of impact. And so how do we do that? As in, one, making sure that these meetings, I mean, instead of, there's a lot of struggle trying to get to the IAC. So can we have, in quote, a type of IAC, a kind of a meeting or a forum in Africa where people want to go to that meeting just like people want to go to IAC. But that's on one hand. But on the other hand, how do we move from just talk or talk shop to action or impact? So you can speak maybe, I don't know, like for you now, I don't know whether you want to speak for Nigeria because you guys are hosting the Africa Space Economy. But generally,
generally,
yeah, let me start with you
yeah.
on that.
So I think again, I'm just going to go back to history. I think when it comes to conferences in Africa, I think we are doing quite great now, having those networking spaces, especially having conferences in a lot of places also provides for accessibility to make sure that, yes, you might not be able to go to Kenya, but if I'm in Ghana, I can probably go to Nigeria, vice versa. So it's easy. But in terms of one conference that we should probably revisit is the African Leadership Conference on Space Science and Technology that was started in 2005. Again, I really appreciate the ALC. I was able to attend the last one in 2019 in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, there've not been another ALC for the past 6-7 years now. But while the ALC is a good model, either we can revamp the ALC or have another version of the ALC, is because it's continental and it had a lot of political support at the AU level and the support of the national space agencies, and fairly very affordable to attend. Again, it was very youth friendly, and of course, again, like I said, continental approach. It was the African Leadership Conference on Space Science and Technology, expert led. So a lot of the steering committee for the ALC and the panel sessions, if you go back and look at any of the ALCs that were held, they were very expert-led, expert-focused, and they had the ALC had a long-term vision, and conferences should also have that kind of long-term vision on what and how you want this conference to impact the space sector. So the ALC was a very good model. So we see some of these conferences, for example, the New Space Africa conference is quite particularly very expensive, and not every maybe young person or researcher might attend. The ALC was a bit of a blend for both. So it accommodated academics, it accommodated industry, it accommodated people from the public sector again. So we need a kind of like an open conference that will be able to, just the way the ISC is, fairly able to accommodate people from different backgrounds. Some of the major conference for now, for example, one of the biggest highlight conferences is the New Space Africa conference, but it's particularly focused in a particular direction. It's a high-level conference. It's focused a lot on space business and everything. But we need a conference where if people want to present papers, for example, which the ALC accommodated. So talking about what kind of conference would be able to accommodate everybody? Sorry, it's a very long answer, but I will go back and say the ALC. And if you don't know or haven't heard about the ALC, just check up the African Leadership Conference on Space Science and Technology. It was held for more than a decade up until the last one in 2019. So I think we really should revisit that model. And then finally, from how to translate talk shop to action, but that's a webinar on its own, 18. But just one thing that I can clearly say is that we can rise above the level of our vision and the level of our systems on the continent. Systems are everything. The systems we put in place to implement some of the things we are saying, some of the goals we have, our vision, and so we have a lot of. For example, one of the major drivers for Africa in space is space for development. And we can argue of if this is good or if this is limiting or if it's kind of going to be a long and philosophical discussion on space for development. But that is one of our core guiding values. And how do we go about implementing development? What does development mean to us? We might have to revisit some of those questions and then have systems in place to ensure that we actually do what we say we want to do. So it comes back to systems such as our leadership. Honestly, the basic things, our leadership, our remuneration, our encouragement for young people, the ability to ensure that we are the ones that are leading change on the continent and not having too much external interference, issues like that. Yeah, I think I'll leave it up for the rest of the panel to comment. It's a long question, long answer.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks, Nelly. Yeah, Mariam, it's like you knew I was coming to you, so that's why you put your comment. So, so the Space in Africa is doing excellently well
Yeah.
with the New Space Africa conference, and I've had opportunity of attending too, even though I was invited to the others, but I think for one was visa, I couldn't attend, but and I was at the last year's zone in Cairo, which was great. So a two-part question too. Number one, okay, there's a plan to have New Space Africa conference again this year. So what should we expect? Maybe this is an opportunity to talk about what the conference was going to happen this year. But also beyond the conference, how do you want to, Nelly has brought up the issue of accessibility. I want to make it accessible to students and young professionals especially, but also beyond that, the discussions, the deliberations that come up during the conference, how do we move from just talking but to action and impact? I know it's a convoluted question, but just let me hear from you. Yeah, sorry, you're muted.
I'm having some tech issues. I have to use two devices.
Yeah, sorry.
So thank you, Etim, for the loaded questions. I'll try to go one after the other. So this year's conference, basically, the focus is the theme is expanding space benefit to all Africans. So the focus this year would be on that. And part of the programs that is in progress right now. One is a section for abstract. It's already been announced on our platform. If it's not announced, it will be announced shortly. So for participants across the globe or Africa to be able to participate, there's also a part that we've designed for pitch, particularly to come and pitch your company, particularly companies in the upstream sector. We saw from the last year's data from Space in Africa that majority of the upstream companies in the new space contributed to global economy, right? It also positioned Africa as one of the top players. Like I mentioned, the companies in South Africa contributed to over 160 products to a mission. It goes to show the level of let's say expertise that is really going on now in Africa and how we can position ourselves to be players in the ecosystem. And third, we do have a part of the conference dedicated to students. There's a student discount that we give to students, 50% discount that is given to students who are coming to participate. And for the conference itself and what it has done in terms of aiding attendance, the conference has moved from different countries over the years. It first started in Nairobi, it moved to Abidjan, Luanda, Cairo, and now we're in Gabon. So these are all efforts that we've done so that there's inclusivity, there's participation in all our conference activities and endeavors. Etim, I don't know if I've covered all the questions. They were loaded. Is there anything else?
Yeah, you did. But I think maybe just one other aspect is the outcome of the conference. How do you want to move from document on paper or post on social media to action or impact?
So to say that part of the work that we do is actually to support organizations. We work closely with AFSA, the African Space Agency, and we do a lot of collaborations that translate from, will I say, talk policy to paper. One of those is directly is even AFSA itself. We contributed to the work that brought to AFSA's inauguration, the groundwork. We were part of the contributors that did that. So we do that. And part of what we actually do again is we track all the events and do a lot of collaborations and partnership. Nelly had mentioned the Women in Space Kenya activity that happened last year. We were a partner for that, and we promoted all the activities that went on during that conference. So indeed, these are focus areas that Space in Africa really puts into consideration when we're designing and putting out our conference agenda for the year. I mean, like the one that we're going to have in Gabon, like I said, is expanding space and space benefits to all Africans, and that will majorly be the focus for that event.
Thanks, Miriam. Johnmark, if I may come to you. So this year we're expecting the Kenya Space Expo. Last year we had the Women in Space Africa. I don't know what that site's called, but there was a conference focused on women. I'm not sure whether it's an annual conference, whether to hold this year. So what should we expect from the Kenya Space Expo and Exhibition? But in addition to that, Kenya appears to be taking I don't know how to call it, a leadership role when it comes to Africa. There is this focus on space innovation ecosystem, which you're doing with RIS. Would you like to also speak around that? What should we expect from that framework, and how do you want to expand to other countries in Africa?
Thank you very much, Etim. So as far as the Kenya Space Expo and Conference is concerned, I cannot clearly speak on it as of now because it is a whole different segment or a different organizing team. But once everything is clear, then I'll be able to speak about that on my platforms. So I'd say the questions that Nelly and Mariam sort of spoke on how do we shift the conversation from the conference room to action. I wanted to speak a little bit on that. And the reason why I wanted to focus on this is because last year, if you can remember, we had the communities of practice, the Kenya Space Communities of Practice conference that we had taken part in. And the reason behind this was to organize different working groups that can sort of focus on specific aspects of space. So whether it's disaster management, whether it's space systems engineering, whether it's space science and astronomy. And this speaks to now how we translate conversations from the conference room to action. So I was thinking if more and more conferences could adopt this model where fine, we register and attend a conference, but then we have clear guidelines where we set responsibilities, timelines, and success indicators to different working groups. So it's not a working group that is created before a conference. So whether it's the New Space Africa conference, once people have joined, and I've seen this happen in one conference I attended. So as you get your badge to get into the conference, you have a specific color on it. So that color will be used as a certain segment to sort of separate you and split you into different groups. So when these groups are formed, it sets clear responsibilities, timelines, and success indicators, as I mentioned. So what this ensures is that there's small concrete wins, and in time it will build credibility and momentum. Now when progress is tracked, it sort of motivates people to have these impact cases that now translate in real life. So I'd say if that model is adopted, and I think it agrees with what Nelly had mentioned, then we could see a shift in how we see or view space. Going by the Kenya Space Ecosystem Review and the work that we're doing with RIS, the ecosystem assessment roadmap, it's something that RIS was working with, and just to be clear, I am not speaking on behalf of RIS, as RIS is the current employer, so RIS is my own. So I'd say it's something that could be annual because it had the first phase was done in Rwanda through the Riser Fund. So it was our collaboration with the Riser Fund and the European Union, if I remember correctly. So it was done in Rwanda, and then now it came to Kenya, where there was the maturity assessment. And hopefully, if it has been renewed, I haven't gotten information on whether it will be renewed. Hopefully, it can shift to a different country. So the reason why this is happening is to, like you had insinuated, is to expand it in different space ecosystems. So we can say Rwanda and Kenya were testing beds for how its adoption and how it translated into impact. So if it worked in Rwanda and it worked in Kenya, will it work in Nigeria as well? So I'd say it's something very broad that I cannot possibly speak about right now. And of course, there are people who are more qualified. And if you or really or any other person would like to speak more into that, then I think it would be prudent to bring them on borders now that they understand the entire scope of how it will be translated. So I'd say those are my reflections for now, I think.
Thank Johnmark.
You can ask questions.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things you've mentioned is the communities of practice, which is a concept. I don't think we'll have time to go into it now, but it's something I would think we may need to explore. I know South Africa has that concept now. Kenya has adopted it, so maybe we see how other African countries can explore it and see how each of these communities of practice can actually connect or link up, but maybe that'll be another time. Lillian,
Yeah, and also,
yeah, go ahead.
just before you move to Lillian, I'd just like to say that we also need to find a way to conquer the aspect of us working in silos. So the African Space Agency has been formed great, but I can assure you that not every country thinks this of organization. Everyone wants to do their own thing. So once we find a way around working in silos, and as you mentioned, if community on practicing Earth observation or disaster management has been formed in Nigeria, one is in South Africa and one is in Kenya. If we found a system for these communities of practice to work together, then I'd say we'd be one step towards ensuring that we actually see more coming out of these interactions. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot. Lillian, so we are expecting the AFSAS conference, the Africa Astronomical Conference. So what should we expect from that? But beyond the conference, astronomy, it's, when we talk about, when people talk about space, oftentimes what comes to mind is Earth observation, satellite communication. How can we bring astronomy to, I don't know, the center of discussions? Because there are a lot of benefits and prospects when it comes to astronomy.
Right. So to give my perspective on the current AFAS conference, I think you've meant AFAS, right? African Astronomical Society.
Yeah.
The one which will happen in Botswana on the coming March. So we expect the gatherings of different astronomical professional peoples, those people and space working in space science and different sectors of the space to gather here and to share, network, and make a meaningful event out of it. So we also have plans on having different outreach and educational activities during that event. I truly believe that outreach and education determines who gets to participate in the space sector. So we have to inform, inspire, and include the young people in these kinds of events when we organize, because we don't need to have a set of limited experts in the continent. We need to have a lot of experts in this area. So we need more young people to be inspired, to be curious about what to pursue in the space sector, and actually to tell them that Africa really is has the capability of doing great things in this sector. So apart from that, I know there's a cliche kind of thing if we say it, that most of the time space and satellites gets more attention than the astronomy, and that's why such kind of astronomical societies are there in Africa to, to show that we actually need astronomy as well. And yeah, our magazine is also trying its best to bridge the gap, to make it accessible for everyone, to share the news about astronomies. Africa has a great capability. We have clear night skies, and we could do much more things in the astronomical sector. So yeah, there still needs some work to do there, and we're trying to close the gaps there.
Well, thanks, Lillian. Nana, let me come to you. I know you have some things to do with RASCOM, and I have high-level intelligence report that you guys are planning something this year in RASCOM. I don't know whether it's now public information, but if it's something you want to speak about, that'll be fine. But aside that, this year, 2026, it's the eve, so to say, to 2027, where we have the WRC, the World Radio Communication Conference, which is a major global conference once every 4 years, where issues around orbits, slots, everything, it's decided, frequency is decided on a treaty basis. How is Africa preparing for WRC 2027? Or how should Africa prepare if we are not yet preparing?
Well, thank you, Ethan. First, with regards to RASCOM, yes, what I know for now is that it is preparing. It is doing a lot of collaboration with its member states to bring member states together to ensure a harmonized regulation to ensure an effective connectivity on the within this satellite telecom space. But I can't speak on it for now because I'm not authorized to do that for now, as you know. Talking about the conference that is coming up this year. It's a great opportunity for Africa to represent, fully in there, and this is where we will have we need need the involvement of the African Space Agency, because if we get there, if we get to at times we get to these conferences individually as countries, and there are things that the benefits that we stand to gain normally is not realized or doesn't materialize. So that's very key that such conferences in the future would have the full representation of the whole of the African Space Agency hierarchy, to present Africa's case and to be able to really also compete and partner with global other global players that would and doing that would bring a lot of benefits to the continent. Ethan, I had the colleagues talking about how we could, and also, you asked that question as to what, we need to do, after the talks, at these various, conferences and seminars and workshops that we normally attend. And I think, attending the New Space Africa conference in Cairo was an awesome. The organization was excellent. A lot of brilliant discussions, concerning the space sector went on. What I didn't see was in which normally I've experienced in other places, other conferences outside the space industry, as rapporteurs taking records, copious notes of every key decision that has been arrived on or that was concluded on, so that right after that there will be a working committee. Right. And this happens a lot within the telecom space. Talk about World Mobile Conference in Barcelona, which will be taking place hopefully next month. The recent past MWC in Kigali, that's when actions after discussions are done, or let me say, every panel discussion session, there are rapporteurs, whose job is to to document everything. Right after that, there are other sessions or other committees as well that will be, going through, that will be tasked with going through, some of these reports that has been jotted down. And then and that would help them to then be able to organize other subcommittees into various areas, and to start deliberating on what needs to be done. And if we are able to model our conferences, especially space conferences, on the ones that we see with like MCW, a Mobile World, Congress Kigali, or Smart Africa transformative, session. The model is quite unique, because at the end of the day, after every session, after every conference, the following month or two or so, there is a concrete, action, concrete plan to ensure that what has been put down or recorded is put into action. And that is why, for example, that's why you see a lot of growth and development within the African technology space, with regards to data, regards to AI. There are a lot of actions going in there, because they don't just talk, they move to actions. Committees are set. Where there is the need to bring together, government figures, ministers, and heads of states, they do. Where there is need to bring, industry players, they do. They lump all of them together. And at the end of the day, they're able to achieve, what they plan to do. And that is what, the space industry in Africa needs to approach their conferences and seminars. If we lack, proper rapporteurs, if we lack, proper community working committee, if we lack the needed coordination, we will not be able to, go anywhere. We'll just do the mere talk thing, and then we'll come back to sit down. One important thing is also the need for such conferences to partner with the media, because some of these space stuff that we're talking about, how many Africans, or how many Africans really understands what it is? No. We need the full collaboration of the media, and that is why there is the need for us to, wherever we find ourselves, or agencies, space agencies, need to connect with some key journalists or media institutions in their country, to ensure that we'll be able to bring live space communication to these people, for them to understand, and so that the myth surrounding the space will be demystified. If not that, we'll be doing that, doing a lot of talk, and then we will not achieve anything. And so moving forward, we need to engage. We need to do a lot of communication. We need to do a lot of PR for the space industry on the continent, and a collaboration with the media is super key. Let me lastly mention, the Ghana Space conference, which I forgot, but also happens to be one of the highlights. Although I couldn't attend personally, but monitored every bit of it online. What its sources, its sources was really as a result of the partnership that that is between the organizers and industry players and key government institutions. And so at the end of the day, we saw the participation of the minister. And interestingly, it's sad to say that Ghana hasn't taken its space business seriously. But last year, we saw the commitment of the government. I've been to a minister's office during the past administration, and it rightly tells you Charlie, this one, I mean, it's not a bread and butter issue. So we're not going to, I mean, it's hard for us to, I mean, concentrate or pay attention to that. Last year, it was the first Ghana Space Conference. We saw the presence of the minister and some key, sector ministers and dignitaries there. That kind of tells us that we're about to, witness something great. And so, yes, there should be a need of, there should be that partnership of, players, organizers, and government, and there should be a lot of partnership with the media as well.
Thanks, Nana. Nelly, I see your hand up. So in addition to the contributions you want to make, there are also some questions in the chat box because I'll start engaging the participants or audience also. It's directed towards Nigeria, so maybe you and Mariam may want to respond. You may want to speak generally, of course, since I know you don't work for the National Space Agency, but with your expertise, you may maybe like a form of advice for the country or for the agency. There are 5 questions, so anyone you want to respond to, it's equally fine. But that's after the initial comments you wanted to make.
Okay, yeah, great. I think I saw a question from Sega Tux. I'm not sure if I'm
that's right. Sega Tux.
Promising, the name correctly. Okay, yeah, let me just blow out my hand. It was just a very quick response to something Nana said that I completely agreed with when he was talking about like output for conferences. And I wanted to add an important point. Oh, yes, and thank you, Mariam, for the updates on the New Space Africa conference and the fact that there'll be pitch and abstract. That's absolutely lovely, very lovely to hear and to know about. So looking forward to the conference as well. So on conferences, the importance of communiques, reports, or repertoiring, like Nana mentioned, is that they also reflect what an epistemic community at that time was thinking in the line of a certain policy direction. So honestly, we are doing the conference now, but in 30, 20, 40 years, people would have to look back to understand what has happened. And when you look back and see the decisions or the direction of the conversation, it shows you how a particular group of experts, like in this case now, how African experts are debating what are the current issues that were being debated. And it also shows you, maybe it helps you understand how later policy actions were made. So very importantly, we hope that this clarifies, because I think all 3 or 4 of us have talked about why conferences are important, but most importantly, how can we leverage them for actual improvement in the African space sector? So it helps reflect or show what an epistemic community, a group of experts or policymakers or politicians was thinking and debating around a particular time. So it's not just for now, it's also for the future. And for the question asked about getting involved in Nigeria by Sega, I can very, very happily and proudly say Nigeria has one of the most advanced space sector on the continent. There's a lot happening, a lot of research going on, and what I would just say is you just need to know what is going on. And one of the ways to keep in touch is to be a part of communities, like maybe SGSC, for example. The current last 2 national point of contacts has a very close relationship with the Nigeria Space Agency. They still do have a close relationship with the Nigeria Space Agency. So a lot of the opportunities, even from NICOMSAT, the accelerator programs, things like that, the Space by Africa community, you would always see links to those, because I'm not in your sector, so I don't know what would be of interest to you. But what I can definitely point you to are communities where those kind of conversations always come up, whether it's astronomy or Earth observation, navigation, or the AI space, robotic space, whatever space you're interested in. So get involved in one of the space communities in Nigeria, and then you would find out what's going on and how you can contribute. So that will be all from my end.
Yeah, thanks, Nelly. Mariam, do you have any contributions with respect to any of the 5 questions posed by Sega? The first one talks about what technical gaps do you observe, and then how do you propose that those gaps be filled? The issue of funding, the issue of collaboration, It's quite a lot, so I don't know which of them you want to respond to. You're muted.
Let me take the technical gap.
Okay.
So for Africa, of course, there's a lot of technical gaps in terms of, will I say, infrastructure in Africa. So right now, there's, I think, Nigeria, for example, NASDA has has put out a tender for its testing facility, and they are trying to fill that technical gap. So, will I say, initiatives like that from countries or space agencies are ways to sort of mitigate that technical gap that exists in the ecosystem. There's also the tender that was put out by Kenya for a spaceport, although it's through a partnership with a private sector, trying to see how they can also bridge the spaceports technical gap in Africa. So these are just two of what space agencies or what countries are doing to bridge the technical gap in the ecosystem.
Okay. So any more discussions from the audience will be much welcome, either through the chat box, or if you want to speak, you can also raise your hand. So maybe we just begin to wind up and maybe focus a bit more on 2026. Maybe I'm trying to be careful not to ask a convoluted question, but maybe first of all, what policy trends should we look out for in the current year? What are your expectations in the current year? Maybe from an African perspective and then from a global perspective. Who wants to go first? Nelly?
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, A-Team. So from a global perspective, I think it honestly, just talking about it at the office today, a lot, the US, it's always the US, the US, the US. And yes, so just starting back with the US executive order, I think you also shared as something we could talk about, where they are looking at how to maintain US space superiority. And they're very clear about their intentions about maintaining US space superiority. And so we're just looking forward to the kind of projects and gaps that we make to go back to the moon for 2028. It's interesting if they are going to keep to that timeline, how it goes, what happens, and some of the lunar considerations. I think just the moon really is what I'm really looking forward to seeing. Last year, the United Nations, towards the end of the year, I believe they had the commercial conference, a commercial lunar space conference. I can't remember the full title of the conference, but it was about discussing some of the commercial trends on the new lunar economy, and just seeing how that is going to go, looking at all the controversies around the Artemis Accords as well. So it's something that I'm looking forward to, because it has a larger impact on the rest of the world. How we go into the lunar space economy, who gets there first, what kind of regimes are we going to have, considering that we don't have a current legal regime, we don't have any treaty. So going back to customary international law, what's going to happen, who's going to set the pace when it comes to the moon, is something I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens this year. But one lesson to take from the last US executive order is that they're very clear about what they want, who they are, what they want from space. We want to lead the world. It is there, very, very, very plain. So I think this just shows a lot of signaling to other parts of the world. Is what do you want to do when it comes to space? You don't have to be the US. Again, I know sometimes, like, because we do space geopolitics, when we talk power, capabilities are the things that we focus on. Who is leading, who has what, who has this spaceport, who is launching, and from where is the launch happening. We talk in terms of power and everything. But in terms of Africa, I think what we really need to do is to have a very clear sense of direction on what we want to do with space on the continent, and how we are going to achieve it. A lot of times we have policy documents, we have the the overall umbrella of space for development, but then we see that national priorities, and then we see that some international partnerships that are happening actually signal competition as well, and some of these broader space industry trends on competition. A lot of research has shown, that is still some of the motif, even though at the phase of it, we talk about using space for specific purposes. So I think, yes, it's a bit problematic when we see the high rise and like extreme capitalist initiatives when it comes to the moon or in space generally being led by the United States. But what that should tell us in Africa is basically to have our own sense of direction and our own clear values, whatever that may be, because I'm not going to impose what that should be. But right now, as an onlooker, someone that works in the industry and as a researcher, it's not just clear what Africa wants to do with space. It's not very clear. We say one thing, but at certain times, everybody's going in different directions. Johnmark has said, working in silos and things like that. It's quite what is the status quo for now. And then secondly, again, what I'm looking forward to for 2026 for the global space industries, the discussion on sustainability, it has come to stay. I think Mariam works in the, astronomy, dark and quiet skies. Research has shown from last year that yes, we need satellite connectivity. It's wonderful, undeserved areas, but we have a real problem here when it comes to the sustainability of outer space. And it's a whole topic of discussion, but how I want to see what kind of discussions, what conferences will be held, or what policy directions it's going to take in us achieving the dark and quiet skies vision that we need to protect spaces for everybody. So how do we really achieve that? What would Africa talk about it? Sorry, not to go on and on, but just to summarize what I'm looking forward to in 2026 as well, is that yes, Africa, we certainly don't have the capabilities, some of the capabilities like for the upstream sector. But what we can do is to ask questions and be very bold about asking questions. Leading nations, they don't cower, they say what they want to do, and they risk it. And when you do that in international politics, it also gains you some level of respect as well. And a colleague told me, when you look at our African space documents, we always try to be very, cautious, not space documents, but broadly now in Africa and global politics, very cautious, but we need to ask questions. And whether it's sustainability, whether it's the moon, we need to be in those topics. We need to be able to read, research. We should invest in understanding what is happening and not to have a kind of, laid back attitude to this. So really hoping that in 2026, the continent as a whole, our leaders are going to be more vocal. I think we already have a very wonderful leadership in terms of our space agencies. They are doing their best. The African Space Agency is also, pushing, but we just need more momentum in terms of, facing it head on and asking the questions that needs to be asked when it comes to the global space economy. So that's it for me, too. Thank you.
Thanks, Nelly. But if I may say, ask maybe we'll direct one more question to you, because you mentioned the US, the executive order December last year, and some of the expectations from the US, especially because of your work studying Africa-EU space relations. How do you see the actions or decisions of the US affecting EU's support for the African space program? Because, for example, the US is, when it comes to funding on some, even funding some organizations, the US is pulling out. Funding some scientific projects, they are pulling out of some projects which was in partnership with the EU. There's a tendency for the EU to begin to look inwards now and begin to find a way to salvage their own programs and priorities. So the question really is, how do you see the US actions affecting EU-Africa partnership?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Etim. For now, I think the Africa-EU partnership program and our collaboration at the region-to-region level now in space, the political collaboration, to be very specific, is very much anchored in very institutionalized projects, programs, and funding. So I would say for the moment, there's a level of stability and security that we can expect for the Africa-EU Space Partnership Program and the collaboration in general. There's political safety in it at the moment. However, outside of because it's linked to the EU Global Gateway and the EU already has funding for this. That's what I'm trying to say. So we are good. So, but outside of this safety net in other issues, I think it goes back to because for example, when it comes to EDI or sustainability, the EU still it's maintaining its core values. It's with some of the issues that has been happening with the EU, the US in global politics, the EU has shown, at least to an extent, a level of displeasure, general displeasure. So there is a bit of a safety when it comes to space. That's what I'm trying to say. But outside of this political safety when it comes to space, I can't say for other areas because it will now go back to what the bone of contention is. However, the lesson that should teach us in Africa is that at the end of the day, self-preservation is very important for any political community to think about. So partnership, collaboration is always important. Even the big boys in the space industry, despite the geopolitical differences, people still look for a way to partner. However, everybody has a safety net of self-preservation. So you should think at the back of your mind, should this not work out, where do we fall back to? How do we bounce back? And that is where South-to-South cooperation may be very important. So how are we partnering with India, with Brazil, with other like mid-level players in the space industry to be able to make sure that we don't only have partnership with the EU, for instance, so that in case it goes south, we have something to fall back to for international partnerships. And then within the continent, what measures are we putting in place to foster intra-Africa space collaboration as well, so that if South to South, if international partnerships are not working, if South to South is not working, how are we working together in the continent? So I think what this signals us is just to have at the back of our mind that we should have measures for self-preservation. Yeah.
Thanks, Nelly. Lillian, what policy trends should we watch out for in Africa, globally, or what other developments should we watch out for? And maybe in particular, you might also want to speak around, because Nelly mentioned issues around the moon. So was it yesterday or 2 days ago, Portugal signed the Artemis Accord, making it the 60th country to join that. 4 African countries have joined so far. Are we expecting more African countries to sign up to the Artemis Accords or to the ILROS? There's also a project going on. There's the Africa to Moon mission, which we are hoping will take off. And that's coming up with China's support. So what do you see happening within that space in particular? But generally, what are your expectations? What are the trends you see?
So from my perspective and my point of view, we should watch out for policies, any kind of global policies, which are made regarding about could be space debris or constellations or anything that's regarded on how to use the space. I think Africa should be able to watch out about those policies. I believe that generally Africa should be able to be alert and not to be a late joiner rather than be an active participant during those policymakers. And I think Nelly has expressed it much clearer and better, since she has much more experience on this policy making. But from my perspective, when I see it as a science communicator, I see that Africa is a big continent, of course, and there are many countries, and I believe those countries should come together and make a clear regulation on what they want, what they need, and then have a clear policy and making their voices heard internationally. So yeah, I think we should watch out for this kind of policies. Yeah, I think this is all I have.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. Nana, if I may come to you also, what policy trends are you seeing? What should we expect in the course of the year? And in particular, yeah, I wanted to speak to the maybe African Union or African Space Agency. Why I say that is because there's a very high probability that Ghana's president will be elected as the chairperson of the AU this year. Um, there's high probability, but it's not until it happens. Yeah. So, and as we are sitting right now, the PROC meeting is going on. That's the Permanent Representative Council, which is made up of all the ambassadors in Ethiopia. After that, the Executive Council meeting next month, then the Assembly of Heads of State. So, what message would you have for the Assembly? I think that's happening in mid-February.
So, well, our president, yeah, is likely to be appointed as the lead person for the AU because he's been very instrumental, very instrumental in ensuring that especially issues that has got to do with the Sahel's, area is kind of being handled in a way that in a collaborative way that would ensure that would bring, peace, within the sub-region. And, it also would help in putting together, it also help in it will make it a little bit easier for Ghana to also collaborate with other partners, especially the African Space Agency's hierarchy in pushing Ghana's space agenda and also promoting the whole African ecosystem. We're seeing the government of Ghana for now, and as I speak with the current minister in charge of that sector, being proactive, showing a lot of commitment to that space, and so we're looking at recently last year we saw the drafting of the Ghana space policy, which we hope this year will transform or will translate into the setting up of the Ghana Space Agency, which we've all been yearning for very soon, and that with the agency with that agency in place, it's going to assist the country to also scale up its activities, and it also help the agents, governments, governments personnel within the sector also to be exposed to the trends that is currently going on, globally and also, and regionally. As things stand now, it seems a little bit. The future looks a little bit, bleak, but I hope with the current administration and with the commitment of the president and the sector minister, and they are gradually trying to, lighten up the Ghana space in this industry. Within the satellites comms area, in the future we hope to see the coming in of direct to cell or direct to device, yes, the mobile handset devices on the market, which is started, or which has been framed as the next mobile revolution. And so and this has an immediate value. It's very practical and scalable. And so we'll see a lot of, in the coming years, we're going to see a lot of devices coming in, and the affordability would also be a challenge. But we hope everybody would jump on it. We will also be seeing a lot of collaboration between the LEO satellite operators and network operators as well. And as it stands now, we have Starlink, Leo, Starlink and Leo pushing out to get a chunk of customers on the continent. And whichever network operator that partner with these operators would definitely gain the first mover advantage. And so satellite communication, I mean, if we must say, is not a replacement, but a multiplier for Africa's connectivity agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Nana. And I've taken note of what Said said in the chat box. It says the African Space Agency must play a significant role in structuring the strategy for space activities in Africa. Direct cooperation with space agencies is one of the best ways to move forward. So we're really hoping to see more of that, more of cooperation within Africa. Johnmark, what policy trends do you see? What are your expectations, especially in the light of activities from the US? I see your comments around US, China, Europe, that Africa needs to engage more proactively. And I also see a comment from David concerning the issue between the US and Venezuela, which appears may extend to some other countries. But generally, what policy trends do you see? What are your expectations for the year?
Say, just to jump on what Nelly, I think Lillian mentioned before regarding the moon. So I'd say the lunar policy is one that we need to watch, because what usually happens, and something that we tend to forget or we tend to misrepresent, is that Africa is behind. I do not agree with this notion, because we are not behind, considering the amount of work that has gone into the African space sector. That is not the work of people who are behind. It is more of Africa is quiet. And what happens when we are quiet is we end up inheriting rules that we did not help right. And so when it comes to the lunar policy, I feel like suddenly there's a shift. No one can claim to be a sovereign owner of the moon, going by the International Space Force. But then now it shifts to resources, traffic, and infrastructure. Who gets to set the operational something? So I feel like entities like the Artemis Accords are great. They can shape behavior, they can spark conversation. And recently, as you had mentioned, one country has joined, making them 60. But then this also triggers alternatives like the International Lunar Research Station by China. And going by the fact that many African countries are already in collaboration with China, you find that this might be the reason why the Artemis Accords are not getting a lot of traction from other countries. So it is an interesting thing to watch, the lunar policy. And I'd say I'd put emphasis on the more quiet we are, the more we end up inheriting that we did not help, right? So in Africa for 2026, I feel like I had mentioned before, we are going to see stronger implementation in 2026. And this is judging by the amount of work that went into the space industry in 2025. So that means less talking and more action. Hopefully it can be actionized by the time we get to 14th January 2027. So that would mean deeper conversations around capacity standards and integration into government systems. So it is an interesting time to be in the space industry, because the different panelists are in different sectors, and they have all mentioned how each sector is contributing and what they expect to see, especially for Nana with space bombs, Nelly, space policy, Mariam, market space in Africa. So I think keeping an eye on how the progress will be like will be very important. So those are my reflections for now, I think.
Thanks, Johnmark. And I've just seen Joanne's comment. The works of Dr. Antonino Salmeri on the Lunar Policy Platform are great beginnings for conversations on space and lunar governance models. Thanks, Joanne. Mariam, what policy trends? I know you guys do a lot of tracking in the space in Africa. So what policy trends should we look out for? What are your expectations for 2026?
So thank you, Etim. So policy trends, yes, we do a lot of tracking of policy around the whole ecosystem. The policy trend I am looking forward to seeing would be more collaboration. And the past year, there has been a trend for space agencies updating their policy. Nigeria did theirs. I believe Ghana even launched theirs in 20.
Sorry, we can't hear you again, Miriam.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, we can hear you now.
So these are policy trends that I personally am looking forward to. Generally on the market, NCC, the Nigeria Communication Commission, just announced the landing license for Leo Amazon. I'm looking forward. It looks like there will be heavy competition for Leo players in the market. There's also the direct to device service that is, in the will I say in the pipeline for the African market. One of the big MNOs, Airtel, just got their what's it called, their license to operate in 14 markets. I'm looking forward to that sort of market penetration for different products and different services in the African markets.
All right, thanks, Miriam. And just to round up, maybe just one final round of questions, just maybe 1 minute or less. Because we started on the personal level, I want us to also end on the personal level. So, personally now, what are your top two or three agenda? What's on your top two or three agenda for the year? Personally speaking now, who wants to go first? Nelly is smiling, so he wants to start first.
I wasn't expecting this question yet, so I'm like, okay, what do I say? Um, I think I'm going to go. You asked something about a book that we would read or something for the question. So maybe,
Yeah, if you want to, yeah, if it's book,
yeah. So
it could be
maybe I'll.
anything. If it's a
Yeah,
book you
yeah.
want to read, if it's a
Okay,
conference
yes.
you want to
So
attend, if it's a book you
okay.
want to write, what's your top two or three
Talk to
on your
agent.
personal
That's
agenda? Yeah.
perfect. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to doing more work in the work I do at Spacehubs Africa as well. Just really building the ecosystem by creating spaces for people to, work together. So I'm really looking forward to that. And my research, of course, my research is really progressing. I've gotten very brilliant and wonderful support from space experts in both Africa and Europe. So just looking more at, finalizing my data collection. And then lastly, I want to read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm almost done with the Hobbits right now. And the reason why I'm reading the Lord of the Rings, um, of course, I've watched the movies over and over. Johnmark is a fanfic like me, so I'm sure he would relate. The Lord of the Rings story is very important in how to understand power, right? And in Tolkien tried to show that most times when we think about power, we think about those that are obviously powerful and people that can make influence. And of course, it also happens in the space sector or in space exploration. We talk a lot in terms of capacity, capabilities, who is doing the big launches, who went in 1960 this and all of that. But in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien tried to show how hobbits, like the least people you could think could create a big impact, where now became the focal point of the story. And I think that could be the situation with Africa, in the sense that John Mac have already said we are not behind. And what we could bring to the table, our values, our sense of community, and looking at other ways that we can really influence the global space community is what I'm really hoping to look at. So hopefully I finish the trilogy. It's a really big story, but at the end of the year, hopefully I get to give you guys a rundown on the Lord of the Rings and the space exploration in Africa. So thanks for having me, Etienne.
Thanks, Nelly. Okay, Miriam, I see you, so maybe I should call you next. On your agenda for this year, top two or three items.
So, of course, my major agenda for this year is to have a successful New Space conference. So, this is me officially inviting everyone to attend and see how the conference is at this stage. Hopefully, I see everyone there. I'm looking forward to seeing you, team Nelly, Nana, everyone on the call. Really, that's for that. I think I've never read Lord of the Rings, Nelly. Maybe I could add that to my year's reflection and add that I'm also looking to improve on my. I've had a lot for 2025 was such a busy year, so to include a lot of readings and all that to my year. I'm looking forward to having more time to reading. Maybe just after the conference. Right now, it's not. Looks like it's not feasible. Thank you, Etu.
Thanks, Mariam. Johnmark?
Yeah,
Oh,
too. So I was just typing in the chat that Mariam needs to understand the phrase "my precious" before she goes into the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Okay,
Uh,
thank you. I'll do that.
yeah, so what I'm looking forward to, or my top three, would be the different space conferences that have been scheduled for the year, the ones that we know of, and the ones that are still at the tentative stage. I feel like these are entry points to initiate discussions and even lead to making an impact in the space industry. As Nelly mentioned, a book that I would be interested to read is one called Space 2.0. And Space 2.0 is by Rod Pyle. So it is on how private spaceflight, a resurgent NASA, and international partners are creating a new space age. So I saw it when I was doing my casual browsing, and it looked like an interesting read. So I'm looking forward to venturing even more into space policy and so, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnmark. Everybody talking about reading books. I also want to hear somebody writing a book. Anyway, Lillian, your top 2 or 3 items, agenda items for the year.
So for me, I would love to publish 2 or 3 more editions of our magazine. So hopefully that would be a thing. I'm looking forward to that. The other one is I will mostly be on maternity leave until half of the year. So maybe I'm trying my best to take on different courses on space diplomacy, could be space policies or anything that would broaden my spectrum on that. And maybe, of course, I'd love to read The Lord of the Rings as well. Maybe we will have a reflection over it on the next year's reflection. And lastly, maybe at the end of the year, maybe I'll do more outreach activities and events and continue inspiring young students across the continent. So that's my plan so far.
Thanks, Lillian, and I say congrats in advance. And of course, when you want to do your courses, you have to join ASLI courses.
Of course.
Yeah. So Nana, finally, the last but not the least.
Right. What talking about book that I plan on reading this year. Want to look at Dr. Space Junk versus the Universe. It's written by one, Alice Goldman, and it talks about what happens to satellites when they die, and what happens also to its reuse. And it's key. Why I want to read this is because sir, is now talking about space debris, and it's becoming a very constant issues being dealt with. And so I'd like to just get my head around it so that I would have an in-depth knowledge about that industry, and so that when the regulation or policies are being driven and written surrounding that industry comes out, I'll be able to, have a fair idea of what it's stating. Secondly, which is something I'm currently working on, is to have an in-depth, interview with, all the the chief executive officers of the African, all the agencies, the space agencies across the country. I know Jane of NACONSAT is doing an awesome job. We have Joshua in Ghana here also, with Ghana Space Agency. You have Hillary in Kenya, Dr. Zolana, Gaspar in Rwanda. These are wonderful, experts who would be able to give us enough knowledge. I mean, and tell us what, all of them are contributing to the, continent's space industry. And so I'm working, and that's what I'm working on now, and looking forward to get it, running, very soon. When it does, Ethem will be the first person to know. And thirdly, I'm looking forward to, get deeply involved in the, upcoming, organization of the, the Ghana, space, conference, the second, this year will be the second time. So, last year I was supposed to be part, but I couldn't. But this year, yeah, I'm looking forward to be deeply involved in that. And fourth, and lastly, fourth will be, planning to join Mariam, in Gabon for the New Space, conference as well. And I must admit, it's such a brilliant conference, and the organizers doing an awesome job for the continent, and so they should keep it up.
Yeah, that's great. And when is the Ghana conference coming up?
Okay, so the date hasn't been set yet. If that's done, I'll give you a heads up on that.
Okay, just one comment. I really appreciate the idea about, I don't know if it's going to be a podcast, but the interview you want to do with the heads of space institutions. Please run with it as much as possible. It's very innovative. It's something I really like to hear. I know in India, they have this, it's called S2, Spaceport Sarabha. It's a think tank. They do very much of oral history about India's space development right from the late 1950s. We don't have such, and I think I've had this engagement with Nelly before. We don't have much of oral history projects in Africa. So yours may be the first. Please run with it. It's very good.
Right.
It's very innovative.
Right.
Maybe one last
Thank you.
point. Next year, 2027, I don't know whether UNOSA still plans to do that, but they were initially planning to have this the 4th UN conference on space exploration. That's UniSpace 4. It's a big conference, and usually it takes time to prepare for that conference. So I'll just encourage each of us in our different domains or offices or spheres of influence to see how we could also be part of that conference, prepare for that conference, and see how we can be part of it. With that, I think we can come to a close now. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for your contributions. Thanks for the discussion. I've actually learned quite a lot. I've been a bit really, really enlightened. So I'm also looking forward to a great year ahead, and looking forward to read all our works, and let's just see what we can do together to push the frontiers of space in Africa. Thank you very much, and hope to engage with us again online and offline.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, Etim. I don't think I even thanked you from the beginning. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Nana, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the New Space Conference, and every other person too. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.